Israel is attracting a great deal of criticism in the international community for the high number of Palestinian civilian deaths. Israel is attracting criticisms, not just Hamas, but your country too.
We are in the middle of a military operation. We are not in a position now to assess who is supporting us, who is not supporting us. We know it's not easy to fight inside civilian population. It is very hard for us. We do the best to avoid casualties. And unlike Hamas, who is using the civilians to hide and is targeting the civilians here in Israel, we do exactly the opposite. We do our best. We even call the civilians and ask them to deploy, to move out from their neighborhoods and not to allow Hamas. But I know it is very hard for them. You cannot blame the civilians because the Hamas is threatening them, is using them. Yes, we are worried about what our friends and allies think, but in a time of war, in a time of conflict, we have to do everything necessary to protect ourselves.
The United Nations Human Rights Commissioner, Navi Pillay, has said at an emergency session of the UN Human Rights Commission on Wednesday that the killings of the children she's talking about in particular, and let me just remind you, around 147 children under the age of 18 Palestinians have been killed. She says their killings raise concerns about respect for the principles of distinction, proportionality and precautions in attack. Let's just take this first, one of these points, proportionality.
Ben, we just showed the pictures right now of those explosions in Gaza. Israel clearly beginning to retaliatory action. What can you tell us about this?
Yes, this comes as no surprise, the action in Gaza. We heard the Israeli Deputy Defense Minister Danon saying that Hamas will be eradicated. Now, given that Hamas controls the Gaza Strip, it's not surprising that that's the target. There's been a lot of rocket fire out of Gaza, Israeli airstrikes over the last few days, but what we've seen overnight is some intense airstrikes. I just got off the phone with someone in Gaza saying that as far as he knows, they've hit a variety of training facilities and other military facilities belonging to Hamas and the other factions. In response, we've had a variety of rockets fired out of Gaza this evening, as well as mortar barrages. So it definitely looks like we have an escalation on the way. This is really just the beginning, John.
What do we know about the investigation itself? How did Israel end up finding these bodies of these teenagers? They've been missing for more than 2 weeks.
Yeah, they went missing at about 10:30 on the 12th of June. We've seen a massive manhunt throughout the West Bank, but focused mainly in the southern part of the West Bank outside Hebron and within the city itself. Now, what's interesting is that apparently what happened was the first body was discovered this afternoon at 5 p.m. Local time by volunteers, people who are affiliated with a nature conservation school not far from here. Apparently, one person went out into a field and found under a bunch of rocks a body. He contacted the Israeli army and police. They came over, closed off the area, found the other two bodies. This was in an area that was only about a 15-minute drive from where the original kidnapping took place on the 12th of June, and in a field that had already been searched by the military and the police. John?
Ben, quickly, you know, Israel insists that it thinks that Hamas is responsible for these deaths. Is Hamas claiming responsibility, though?
Do you believe that Israel's response to the campaign by Hamas has been a proportional one, proportionate?
Absolutely.
No, Hamas praised the kidnapping but did not claim responsibility. There were
Absolutely. When you look in proportion, you ask yourself, when you have millions of Israelis running into shelters, hundreds of missiles. I look at myself, when my daughters for the last 2 weeks have to wake up in the middle of the night and run to the shelter every night. This is not a way to live. The only thing we ask is to live peacefully in Israel. That's not much. And we're defending ourselves.
I'll just reiterate my question again to you, Danon. Is Israel's response a proportionate one? Around 650 Palestinians have been killed. 74% of them, according to the United Nations, are civilians.
In the initial days after the kidnapping, there were a variety of claims of responsibility, but none of them could be verified. Now, what's interesting in this case is that there is not unanimity among Israeli security officials that this was an operation that was approved by the higher echelons of Hamas's military wing. Many of them believe that the two individuals that Israel has pointed to may have been affiliated with Hamas, but it may have been just sort of an ad hoc operation. They were basically targets of opportunity.